spooky friends. Welcome to another episode of the Murder News podcast. We like to treat these weekly episodes like weekly meetings for our very own true crime cult.
But don't worry, we're not about any of that sleep deprivation or diet control stuff. You've landed in the only cult with unlimited naps and snacks. Grab a flower crown, cozy up to one of our baby goats, and settle in for another story on the subject that brought us all together, murder. Just because you tune into our show every week, we like to think of you as honorary monsters. But if you want to make it official, you can join the MMN commune on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/murdernews to sign up. And in return, we'll send you some murder merch, name one of our baby goats in your honor. And of course, you'll have exclusive access to our regular patron-only content.
Before we dig in, let's take a look at some of the true crime stories making headlines this week. There has been an update to the case of Lauren Smith Fields. If you've been following the case, you'll remember that the 23-year-old woman was found dead in her apartment in December after meeting a man from Bumble for a date. After the medical examiner initially ruled Lauren's death an accident, a criminal investigation was finally opened over a month later. Her family announced last month that they plan to file a lawsuit against the Bridgeport Police Department after they decided not to bother investigating Lauren's date because he, quote, seemed like a nice guy. The Smith Fields family feel that the police department's investigation was insufficient and has violated their civil rights. Now, 2 police detectives have been removed from the case and placed on administrative leave. Bridgeport police detectives Kevin Cronin and Angel Lano are now being investigated by Internal Affairs.
I'm so happy to finally see this case picking up steam and getting some more much-needed media attention, for sure.
Yeah.
R. Kelly has allegedly contracted COVID-19 in jail, and his lawyer has used this as leverage to earn him time for an appeal. Jennifer Bonjean, who is known for filing a successful appeal for Bill Cosby, has been granted extra time to file an appeal for Kelly's sex trafficking conviction. The high-profile lawyer says the jail's visitation policies relative to COVID-19 have prevented R. Kelly from consulting with his legal counsel, and so a 2-week extension has been granted. As far as we know, Kelly's sentencing is still scheduled for May 4th, and he could face up to life in prison.
We'll be right back after a quick commercial break.
I am your host, JD Horror, and this is True Crime Horror Story, a true crime podcast designed like an anthology horror movie. It's definitely not for the faint of heart and never played for laughs. Listener discretion is strongly advised. In seasons 1 through 4, we highlighted both notorious and obscure incidents of real-life murder. From world-famous psychopaths like the Toolbox Killers and Jeffrey Dahmer, to lesser-known evils that you may not have heard of, but have effects just as catastrophic for the victims and their families. Season 5 is coming soon, so subscribe now wherever podcasts can be consumed, and check out our website at www.truecrimehorrorstory.com. True Crime Horror Story. Sometimes truth is more brutal than fiction.
And we're back. Now, before we get into our story, we just want to say that while our tone is light in the intro, we do take the topics we're discussing very seriously. We are best buds and we love chatting together every week and turning it into a podcast. We want to share that passion with you and to create a vibe where all of you feel like our best buds too. We joke about us friends forming a cult or commune, but that's not to diminish the severity of actual cult activity, which we do occasionally talk about in our weekly stories. We feel it's important to open up and talk about even the darkest aspects of humanity and the downright scary things that come up in the news. But we want to make it clear that our intention is never to sensationalize, and we always try to deliver these stories with respect to all parties involved or affected by the crimes we discuss.
We always post our sources in the episode description, so you can do some digging on your own if a story we present piques your interest. But you should know that if you ever feel we get it wrong, either in our tone or in the details of the case, we want to hear about it. We are more than happy to make a correction or give an update on a case we've discussed in previous episodes. So feel free to reach out to us at murdermurdernews@gmail.com. Some specific trigger warnings for this episode include mention of suicide, gun violence, and possible transphobia. If any of those subjects are particularly sensitive for you, you may want to skip this one and listen to one of our other episodes instead.
21-year-old Alexander Blake VanDalsen was reported missing on February 4th, 2021, exactly 1 year ago today, after vanishing from his family's home in Lafayette, Indiana, late the night before. Alex's mother, Jennifer VanDalsen, knew something wasn't right when her son's girlfriend showed up at the house saying the couple had plans, but he was nowhere to be found. 5 days later, Alex's body was found 10 miles from home. Police were quick to rule the death a suicide, but again, Jennifer knew something wasn't right. The details just didn't add up. For starters, why would Alex walk 10 miles on a cold, snowy night only to kill himself? Without a coat or any winter gear, he would have died from exposure on the way. And then there was the apparent cause of death, the position Alex's body was found in, and the conflicting details on the autopsy report.
Jennifer is still fighting for answers. She wants to know what really happened to her son and to get justice for him. She's also trying very hard to understand why neither the authorities nor the media are taking Alex's case seriously. Alex was a trans man. Could there be transphobia at play? Or could it be laziness? Perhaps the police weren't inclined to investigate Alex's death because he was known to suffer from depression, and it was easier to just chalk it up to a suicide. When you hear the details of the case, you'll understand why suicide seems highly unlikely and why Alex's mom is still fighting for him. We thought what better way to tell Alex's story than to hear it straight from someone on the inside of the situation. We spoke with Jennifer VanDalsen about the confusing details of her son's case and the kind of reception she has received from local media and law enforcement, all because she won't give up.
Let's just start off by giving our listeners a sense of who Alex VanDalsen was. It's hard to sum someone up in just a couple sentences, but how would you describe Alex to someone who had never met him?
Adventurous, fun-loving, too trusting. He just overall had a big heart. Always wanted to make everybody smile.
What kinds of things was Alex really into or passionate about?
Music. Music was about the only thing he was really big into. He liked music videos, sing and dance.
So you also have two daughters. Was Alex really close with his sisters?
Over the years, they had struggles like any siblings, but yeah, the last several years, they were all really close.
And how old was Alex when you and his father split up? And did you have any sense of what that was like for him? Did he seem to struggle or anything with that split?
Alex would have been 12 or 13. And all the kids were happy when we split. Their only wish was it would have been sooner. So it was a bad, rocky, not good for anybody's situation.
And Alex was transgender, and we've heard that you have been very supportive. As it sometimes happens when young people are figuring themselves out, Alex came out as a lesbian before he realized he was trans. How did you respond to Alex wanting to transition, and was it difficult for you to come to terms with at first?
Not really. He just kind of told me one night, and I said, okay. Like, at the time, I didn't know what all it would entail. But I told him that we'd look into it, see what my insurance would cover.
Mm-hmm. How about other people in his life? Did anyone struggle to accept Alex's identity?
think for the most part, his friends were all accepting. I think for the family, mostly his biological father wasn't so much. But other than that, I think everybody pretty much was.
After you split with his biological father, did he have much a relationship with him? Like, did it seem like him not being supportive was sort of difficult for Alex, or were they not really in touch much?
Initially, he played games with all the kids. Kind of to punish me, maybe.
Mm.
And then when that wasn't working, he didn't have much of anything to do with any of them. If they contacted him, then he might answer, but that was really about it.
So we heard that Alex had struggled with depression and anxiety, and that he had even felt a bit suicidal at times in the past. But he began seeing a therapist and taking medication. Did you notice a big change in Alex since he started seeking help for his mental health issues? Like, did he seem like he was getting better?
Alex always seemed happy. He was always trying to make other people smile. That was important to him. So he didn't let things that were bothering him show a lot. But he seemed like he was getting more confident, and it didn't seem like things were going the wrong direction. And he was fighting hard to manage everything.
So we also heard that though you're sure that Alex had probably experienced bullying, he never talked about that. He preferred to just ignore negative people. Did he talk much about his friends? Like, did you know any of his friends or what they were like?
I knew quite a few of them, especially through school. They would come to the house. But I think he didn't focus on the bullying, or it wasn't important to him. He had some amazing friends too that were real supportive. So that helps.
And do you know if Alex was ever involved with drugs at all?
Did go through a period where he liked to smoke weed. He hadn't for a couple of years. It was a lot, mainly when he was younger and visiting his biological dad.
Oh.
That seemed to be a treat that Alex was given, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he did like to drink, but he had also stopped that as well. So,
had you heard about any drama among Alex's friends in the time leading up to his disappearance? Do you mention anything going on, even minor stuff?
There was one. Over the years, they always argued on and off. And this particular time, she was threatening to come shoot up the house. And, but I don't, like I said, they were back and forth like that.
And Alex had a girlfriend at the time. Can you tell us a little bit more about her and what their relationship was like?
Genesis was his girlfriend at the time. They seemed to be doing great. They were talking about what they wanted to do for the future. he was looking at rings.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Yeah. They were talking about traveling for a little while before they settled down somewhere, and everything seemed to be going the right direction. And then this happened.
So can you walk us through what you can remember about the day leading up to Alex's initial disappearance? Like what kind of mood he was in that day? Do you remember him talking about any plans or anything that was on his mind?
Well, that was February 3rd. He was actually supposed to start a new job that evening.
Oh, wow. What was the job?
It's a clerk at a liquor store just in town from here. And he left like he was going to work. I was already at work. And then his sister said he came back an hour later. So they didn't have his paperwork ready yet, so he couldn't start. But everything seemed normal. The 2 days prior, he was at his girlfriend's house. She was at work, so he called me wanting me to come get him. I could have got there and back and still got to work, but I thought, well, I'll just take the evening off and we'll go run around, do whatever. And he was supposed to meet the girlfriend when she got off work. So I was like, okay, we'll hang out till then. Me and his younger sister went and picked him up. We ran around for a couple hours, came home. Everything seemed like it always was. The next day, February 2nd, he volunteered to go grocery shopping for his oldest sister because she has 2 little kids. It had gotten cold and snowing real bad. And so he volunteered to go to the grocery store for her so she didn't have to take them out. And him and his younger sister went to the store, then went to the oldest sister's house and hung out with the kids for a couple hours, then came back home. So those 3 days, everything just seemed wasn't anything abnormal or
right.
weird going on.
Very typical. Right.
Yeah.
And can you fill us in on the timeline of Alex's initial disappearance? What time did he leave the house? Do you know what he took with him? Also, we heard that he didn't have his glasses, inhaler, warm clothing, etc.
So he left February 3rd about 11:45 p.m. We were still at work. But we were able to go back and look at the cameras and see which way he walked. But he left with just his driver's license, whatever cash he had on him. I don't know how much that was exactly. When he was found, he had $8 left. He was wearing a pair of blue jeans with sweats over them, and then a long sleeve t-shirt with a thin Chevrolet hoodie sweatshirt, and then a beanie hat.
And it was really, really cold outside that night, right? And lots of snow on the ground.
Yeah, it was about 20 degrees and quite a bit of snow, a lot more snow than we normally get around here.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wasn't prepared to last out in that weather for very long.
Yeah.
And he didn't take his car. So
Yeah, he left the car and the keys.
And I had heard that also he has like quite bad asthma. So like the option of leaving to go out into the cold without his inhaler would have seemed pretty ridiculous. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
For any kind of activity, definitely. it wouldn't be abnormal for him to forget the inhaler at home if he's just going into town or going to a friend's. But to go walking any distance or anything like that without the inhaler wouldn't be a good idea for him.
Right.
So based on how he was dressed and what he had on him, it didn't seem like he was prepared for much of a walk. Like he would either be going somewhere nearby really quick or just maybe hopping into someone else's car, but he probably wouldn't go out like that planning on, a long walk, you would say.
Yeah. I think he was planning on somebody picking him up.
Right. And are you like a pretty close walk? You mentioned going into town to a friend's house. Like, is there any place that would have been close enough for him to walk to?
The closest place would be about 5 miles, maybe.
Ooh.
I mean, we have some neighbors, but
still a good walk.
Yeah. I think the closest gas station is probably a good 5 miles from here.
Yeah, that seems pretty far to walk in 20-degree weather in a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you discover that Alex wasn't at home, and what were your initial thoughts on where he might be?
Home that night and didn't think anything was out of the ordinary. We had talked to his younger sister, Morgan, and she thought Alex had went to bed. So I was like, okay, I won't bother him. The next morning, I looked in his room and didn't see him, but I figured that Genesis had picked him up. They did that a lot. If they were just going to her house, they'd leave his car here instead of taking both of them. So it didn't seem out of the ordinary to me until Genesis showed up here that evening. And when she showed up that evening, then we knew that he wasn't with her. And then we found his phone in his room, which, again, not terribly abnormal for him, because if he wanted to ignore somebody's message or phone call, he'd just leave the phone laying somewhere. But him and Genesis were supposed to have plans the evening of the 4th. So it wasn't really like him to not be back for that. And that's when we started searching everywhere for him.
And at what point did you decide to file a missing person report?
I went to most of the areas that he would have been at if he would have been by himself. He wasn't there. So at that point, I came home and called 911 to file the missing persons report about 10 p.m. on the 4th. But it was after midnight by the time they finally showed up. And I had to call back a second time. They were worried about road conditions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
How long was it between your first and second phone call to them?
Just over an hour.
Wow. That's a while to wait. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about your interaction with the police who did finally respond to the call?
There wasn't really a lot of interaction. They finally showed up, said, okay, here, fill out this paper for the report. And that was about it.
Okay.
Wow. So little interaction.
Yeah.
Wow. And what happened next? Was there a search for Alex? What were the next steps?
We were all out searching most of that night. Me, my husband, my mom, Genesis. We called his best friend, Cassie. She got a group together. They were out searching as well. And then the next day, more people joined. We live out in the county, a lot of farm fields and stuff like that surrounding us. And our neighbors were sending their kids out on four-wheelers and snowmobiles to search the fields and areas.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were all surprisingly very nice. We searched pretty much every area nearby here with obviously no luck.
Right.
And did it seem like the police were helping organize or helping participate in any of the search?
Oh, no. No, they didn't help with any of it. They didn't they didn't do anything. They didn't care.
Wow.
They didn't even put a detective on it until the day before he was found. The lady that we found that had the search dog, we found her through a guy that I work with. And come to find out, the police could have told us about her, which would have saved us like 18 hours.
I'm sure the police have probably a few contacts to deal with things like that they could have pointed you in the direction of at least. It's weird to
and
say
like
nothing
when
about
somebody's
it.
missing 18 hours is really a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't tell us anything. They didn't help with anything. They didn't say you should try this, you should nothing. They didn't even give us ideas. It was just like, okay, we took the report, we don't care. We're done.
Paperwork.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where and how was Alex's body finally discovered?
He was found February 9th, just before 1 p.m. by a city parks worker who was plowing the trails. I don't know if you really call them trails, but it's this weird access road in between two sets of railroad tracks.
Okay.
And he called 911 when he found Alex. They sent city officers out. It wasn't until recently that I actually found a little bit of their banter on the scanner comical. They were complaining about the almost foot of snow on the ground and trying to get to the location that the caller was calling from and trying to give each other directions. And it's like, nobody's lost.
Just to clarify, you live in a place where a foot of snow in early February is not uncommon, correct?
I mean, the last few years in Indiana, we haven't seen a lot of snow, really.
Okay.
So
it makes some sense that they're not super prepared for this kind of weather?
In Indiana, you should always be prepared for any kind of weather.
Right.
Very Midwest.
Yeah, it can change every 5 minutes.
Right. And can you give us details you received about what condition Alex's body was in when he was found?
Everything that I was told was a complete lie. The county detective showed up right around 4:00 that afternoon and told us that Alex had been found deceased. When we asked what happened, he told us there was no obvious signs of trauma, so we had to wait for the autopsy to find out. My mom asked at that point if he froze to death. The detective said no. And I was like, well, how do you know that if you don't know? And he said, well, we have to wait for the autopsy because there was no obvious signs of trauma. And he repeated that at least 4 times.
Wow.
Standing in our living room. And then told us that he was found on the softball fields, which was not true either. Told us that Alex had no ID on him, so he showed me a picture of Alex's tattoos to ID him. We later found out he did have his ID on him. And when we went to the funeral home to make the plans, they, of course, asked what happened. And we told them what the county detective told us. Mm-hmm. There was no obvious signs of trauma, so we were waiting for the autopsy to find out what had occurred. We made the plans based off of that. The funeral director called me Saturday morning and told me that we had a problem. So I don't understand, but what kind of problem? He said, well, what were you guys told? So I told him, no obvious signs of trauma, so we're waiting for the autopsy. And he said, I shouldn't be the one to tell you this. Okay. And I'm confused. He said, no, a bullet wound to the head doesn't get more obvious. I didn't even know what to say. So I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's not, they would have said that. It's like, I don't know why they didn't.
Wow, that's very mysterious.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he helped us pick a different casket and liner. Since what we picked out previously wasn't going to work now, I guess.
It's just confusing to me. Like, do you have any sense of where this came from on the cops' end? Like, it's certainly like he had to know you were going to find out that what he was saying wasn't true. The ID was there, clear signs of trauma. Like, do you think he just didn't know the case? Like, he didn't care? Or do you think it was a deliberate lie?
So he doesn't work weekends. So Monday, my initial hope, I guess, was that they were investigating, and that's why he lied. He didn't want to give out too many details or specifics until he had a chance to investigate some. When I called him Monday to inquire as to why he told us this, and then the funeral home had to call and tell us this, he proceeded to tell me that he did not recall saying that and wasn't trying to mislead me. Well, no, that's not misleading me. I mean, that's an outright lie.
Yeah.
And I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt, but now you're telling me that you had no reason for it. That doesn't work for me very well. So, and he had nothing. He just wanted to stick with his, he didn't recall saying that. Well, he said it at least 4 times in my living room. There were
wow
4 of us present to hear it. So
yeah, that sounds a little sketchy.
Yeah.
To say the least.
I mean, they lied about everything. I don't.
Right.
Where he was found at. Mm-hmm. The ID. I mean, we had to find where Alex was found by the scanner calls. Wow. Because of the officers who were getting lost, giving, the other ones giving them directions to get them there. We followed those directions to be able to find where he was found at. And then we were searching that area for his ID or anything that he could have left there. Only to find out later that he actually had the ID on him.
And then at first, the police informed you that the autopsy report was not available. So I guess you went straight to the coroner, who gladly shared that with you. What new information did you learn from the autopsy report?
More confusing, I guess. We learned that there wasn't a full autopsy done, just an autopsy of his head. And the entrance wound, or how they label the entrance wound, seems completely backwards from what it should actually be, because they have it considerably larger than the exit wound.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which makes zero sense.
Nope. Doesn't happen that way.
No, it was like 6.5 by 5, and then the exit was 1.5 by 1.
Wow. Just not how physics works, but
No.
that does make you wonder, again, is this incompetence of them just writing things down wrong for no good reason? Or, do they have some reason they would try to pretend that he was shot on the other side? I guess it does appear easier for them to just write it that way if someone is found alone with a gun and just chalk it up to that's the end of the story. But when the rest of the details don't fall in line, it sounds weird to stick with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, at first I thought, okay, new people, or I didn't think that it was malicious or intentful.
Mm-hmm.
But as time went on and we learned more and more, it seems more like they did it on purpose, not that it was lack of knowledge or incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
More of that. No, I mean, we know this, but we don't care, and we want to make it look like this, so we're going to put this. And I don't think it was accidental at this point.
Yeah, like it feels like to me, at like the very lowest rung, that it would be that they wanted to rule his death as suicide, as lazy police work, as like the least malicious option,
just
like
to
no
not
cover
have
up
to
or whatever.
investigate.
But yeah, just like, let's call this done. It was suicide. The gun was found on the left-hand side. He was shot on the left-hand side. Suicide, even though the evidence doesn't match up to that. Done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then when his mother is coming forward and persisting and trying to figure out what happened, they should realize that they can't just let it go at that.
I had hoped so.
Continuing to argue when that's what comes up is really concerning.
I think that's why they just altogether quit speaking to me, because they've given me their excuses. They don't have anything else. What? They didn't investigate. They didn't bother to do much of anything. So why continue speaking to me when all they can keep saying is the same thing over and over again, which doesn't add up?
Right. Yeah. So let's come back to some more of the evidence that just doesn't line up. Some things that stick out to you as being red flags that this was not a suicide as they had rolled. We know the entry and exit wounds seem to be reversed. What other things stand out to you?
There's no blood spatter noted on the scene. With a head wound, it's got to be there. The snow that was on the ground, the snow would be colored. It would be obvious.
Wow.
Yeah, he would have at least bled after, being lying in the snow. It seems.
Yeah, but the only thing in the reports is that there was blood pooled in his beanie.
Wow.
Just doesn't add up.
No.
And then no shell casing. They somehow couldn't locate the shell casing from his handgun. It would be right there near him.
Right.
Where the gun landed doesn't add up very well, because
which is underneath him.
Yeah, barely visible, if visible at times. It wouldn't have landed under him. And then he supposedly was found laying flat on his back, legs straight out, ankles crossed. And then his left hand in the sweatshirt hoodie pocket with the right hand, the hip stomach area.
It does sound to me way too casual to have his hand in his hoodie pocket. It sounds like he would be in that posture if maybe he was caught off guard, you know?
Yeah, it seems a little odd but I asked even about the possibility of his body being posed.
It sounds like that.
And the one lieutenant said that he felt the same until further evidence came to light.
Which evidence?
He, of course, didn't have any to share.
Wow.
And my guess is it seems to me by everything, the city police were actually starting to investigate properly. One of the city officers recognized Alex from a missing poster. And that's when they called the county in. And it seems like that's when everything started to go bad. Like they called county and county said, "Oh no, this is suicide. Forget it." So, and obviously I can't say that's definitely what happened, but the city was looking for a shell casing. They couldn't find it. They had started to question the car that was stuck in the snow not far from where Alex was found. Even though none of the stories on that car make sense.
Can you tell us a bit more about this car? And did Alex know those people at all, or did you, or does...
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I have tried to locate them on any social media platform. I can't. I've been unable to find anybody that matches up to their age and description and name anywhere.
And so the story here was they kind of, they had the car stuck and then sort of abandoned it and then came back and tried to pull the car out again.
Yeah.
Okay.
But their stories, the female said that that her boyfriend was driving the car. He wanted to go back in that area to smoke a joint and ended up getting the car stuck. He said that he wasn't even with her, that she got the car stuck and called him for help. This all supposedly happened February 8th around 9 p.m. But there was a tow truck driver that they talked to that saw the car stuck there around 11 a.m. on the 8th. So there's a big time difference there from when they admit the car got there to when the car was seen by somebody else being there. It's hard telling when the car actually got stuck there. But for whatever reason, even though she said this and he said this and a tow truck driver said this, the cops said, "Oh, okay, you're good to go."
Does seem very suspicious, at least worth looking into.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it shows, if they're not looking into it just for the sake of figuring out what is going on over there, even unrelated to Alex's case, then, it shows some more potentially just lazy police work, which is not a good indication.
Yeah.
So there was, as we mentioned, a gun found at the scene, which was sort of underneath Alex's arm. We heard that the investigators seemingly just assumed that gun belonged to Alex, but Alex didn't own a gun. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you recognize that gun at all, or do you have any idea whose gun it might have been?
I had some ideas, but no way to confirm. And the police ran it to see if it was reported lost or stolen, but that's all they did.
So they didn't run it just to check and see if it was registered to anybody or to talk to that person? There was none of that?
Nope.
What?
Nope. They said, the one lieutenant that I spoke with said that the gun came from home, which was an outright
Did
lie.
not.
No. And we told them numerous times. One of the first things that I did was check the gun safe, and all of ours were accounted for. So he turned around and said that they were going to trace ownership at that point. But if they bothered to, they never said a word.
Wow.
Because they quit speaking to me. So
Wow.
I highly doubt that they bothered.
And are we even sure that the gun that was found at the scene matches the type of bullet that was used in the shooting?
No, there's a good reason to believe that it was not. The size of what should be the entrance and the exit wound, which is backwards from how the coroner notes it, actually more matches a 45 than a 9mm.
And so how did you find that information?
Actually found that through Muddy Waters Search and Recovery. They were doing a mini series on Alex's case.
Okay.
Where they had talked to some people, and then they did a short video reenactment. And then when I Googled it, of course, you can find the standard wound sizes for a 9 and a 45.
Again, this is something that a coroner and a police team should all be very familiar with.
Right.
I would definitely think so.
Wow. So also, Alex's clothes were never returned to you after the autopsy. And as we've gone through, there's so many details on the report that don't add up, even though this was ruled a suicide. Do you feel like the police on this case were covering something up at this point? I know you said at first you're wondering if they're lazy or if there's something. Like, do you think there's something here that they're trying to directly avoid?
I do. But I'm not 100% sure what. I'm confident at this point that they did not go to all this trouble because it would have been so much easier to just do their jobs.
Right.
So they have went above and beyond to make a complete and total mess of all of this. There's got to be a reason behind that. I didn't expect the police to do as horrible of a job as they did. I really thought that they would do what they should have done. And then we started seeing the reports and obviously realizing the lies that they were telling us. So at that point, it's like, wait a minute. What's going on here? This doesn't, 2 + 5 doesn't equal 4. So where are they getting this from? And they couldn't answer anything. At best, they could give me some excuses, just like admitting that they initially thought the body was posed as well. But the answer for why they changed their opinion there was, well, further details came to light. Okay. What are those further details?
Yeah.
Nobody knows. At least not that they're going to admit to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I lost all faith and hope in them forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we heard that even though local journalists had approached you about doing a story about the police mishandling Alex's case, they suddenly stopped talking to you and no story ever came out of it. And also the worker who found Alex's body refused to talk to you. Do you have a sense of what's going on here and why everyone's just kind of ghosting you? Like, do you even know if they ever at any point spoke to the police?
I do not. I mean, I have theories as to why. I can't confirm if they spoke to the police or they didn't speak to the police. And I think that they must have. Um, because the reporter reached out to me initially, started texting me, wanting to do a story. And this was a day or two after Alex was found. So this was long before we knew about all the inaccuracies and inconsistencies in the reports. He was initially wanting to do a story on why the police failed to report Alex missing to the news station. Apparently, they have some sort of agreement because we had been continually calling and messaging this news station trying to get them to run a missing segment on Alex. And nobody ever responded to us. And so he messaged me saying that he was curious as to why the police did not reach out to them, letting them know that Alex was missing, because you get the information from the police and then they run the story. And of course, I said I had no idea. The Purdue Exponent ran the story that he was missing, but this news station would not. And he kept pushing me to do an on-camera interview for the story. And initially I was like, you know what? I don't know that I can. Like, I would love to see the story out there and the why behind their lack of involvement in all of this. And he said that whether I did an on-camera interview or not, they would still do the story. But okay. So a week or two goes by and I message saying, hey, yeah, I'll do it. If you do the story, nothing. No reply, no answer of any kind. The gentleman that was here while Alex was missing with the thermal imaging drone did the same thing. When we started getting all the reports and seeing the inaccuracies, I contacted him. Said, hey, I don't understand like where this is coming from, that's coming from, and they're not really talking to me at this point. He offered to send what I had to other professionals for review. I thought that would be great. So I sent him everything. He stayed in contact with me until about the time he said he'd have the reviews back and then quit speaking to me.
Wow.
Yeah. The city plow worker that found Alex, I have tried multiple means to reach out to him, mutual friends, Facebook.
It's kind of mysterious that all of these people should have the same attitude all of a sudden.
Right.
What happened to Alex's phone in the end?
I still have it.
And the police, they tried to do a search of the phone, or they did do a search but didn't show you what they found, or?
They claim they ended up doing a search. I highly doubt it. They initially took the phone the day before he was found. I gave him a passcode. Thought they would start looking at it immediately, only to find out later that they hadn't looked at it yet because they claimed they were going to have to get a search warrant for it. I said, no, I gave you the phone. I gave you the passcode. You want me to sign something? The detective finally ended up saying he would contact the prosecutor to find out if that would be allowed or not. And then finally, they said, oh, yeah, okay. You can come down here and sign a consent form so we can search the phone. So we went down there, signed their consent form. But if they went through it at that point, they gave us nothing from it.
And so if you have the phone back and you know the passcode, are you able to access sort of messages and things like that yourself on the phone?
Yeah, we went through everything that we could on the phone. Um, but we don't know what was deleted.
Right.
And I don't, honestly, there could be hidden apps there I don't know about.
Right.
There wasn't anything like blatantly obvious about his plans for the night, any text or calls?
To meet someone or anything? No.
Okay. So Alex left a note at home with a list of items to return to Genesis. What do you think that note meant, and whose phone number was written on it?
It was Genesis' phone number. And honestly, I have no idea. I have tried to think of this or that, and I don't know.
Was it sort of like, here is everything I have that belongs to Genesis. Can you give it all to her? Or was it just sort of, a couple of random items, but not sort of everything?
Yeah, it was just random items, not everything. So
it didn't seem particularly important, I guess.
Not really, but
So the police, as you mentioned, were kind of weird about Alex's ID. They made you ID his body by a tattoo on his arm because they said they had no ID. He had no ID on him, but you found out later that was in his pocket. You also mentioned the police were dismissive and then seemingly annoyed, both when performing a wellness check on Alex in the past and when searching for Alex after you reported him missing. Did those police come across to you as like transphobic? Did that seem like the issue at hand?
I think that's a good possibility. There was, when the lady brought the search dog over, she had called the county sheriff's department to let them know that she would be coming here to do a search. And they sent 2 deputies out to meet her, one of which had been here for a wellness check previously. And he was rude. He clearly had a bias against Alex from before he even showed up here that day. And in his report, he claims that he was acting like an idiot because this was a similar situation to what he had been called for before. So he was curious what the outcome was of the previous situation, and that was likely to be the outcome this time.
But Alex was not missing before, correct?
Correct. Never. No similar situation. A wellness check where me and Alex were both present is totally different than the child being missing. I think he was just trying to look for an excuse for his bad attitude.
Do you get the impression that the police you have dealt with believe that depressed young people are not important, like their murders just aren't worth solving if they may have been suicidal anyway?
Honestly, I don't know if they're that way with everybody, or if it's because Alex was trans.
What do you believe at this point happened to Alex?
I think somebody picked him up a couple houses down from home. Whatever transpired wasn't good. And then they ended up placing his body where it was found.
Have you hired a private investigator to help you with your son's case?
I have not. They want a minimum of $5,000, all the ones I've talked to. So, of course, I will as soon as I can. It's just going to take a little while after paying off the funeral when COVID has obviously restricted our hours at work, which doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's one of the things that's so upsetting about this sort of situation is that, like you need help with this and there's just so many things that you're not able to do. The police aren't helping you. And then a private investigator is just so wildly expensive. Like that's a lot of money to spend and to be able to come up with. And it's like you're kind of at this stalemate where you are incredibly resourceful and you've found so much of this information yourself and you've been knocking on doors and making phone calls. But there's people that won't talk to you because you're not the police. And there's just like there's only so many things you can do as a person who's not a police officer or a private investigator who has police assistance or training, I mean. And so it's like, but what do you do next? Because like, who can afford that? Who can afford to get a private investigator?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
So that brings us to what can our listeners do to help? I imagine at this point, trying to work towards hiring a private investigator. Is there some place that people can donate? You have a GoFundMe set up?
We do have a GoFundMe set up. It's posted on the group.
So we'll link that in the show notes. And aside from that,
sign the petition on change.org. It's also
and so they can
there.
join the Facebook group. If anyone out there has any information, knows anything about what could have happened to Alex, should they call the police or bring it to the Facebook group, or what would be your best recommendation?
That's a good question. I don't know if the police would bother to look at anything. Obviously, a lot of people would be more comfortable calling the police, and I get that. And if that's what they want to do, I would think that either the Tippecanoe County Sheriff's Department or the Lafayette City Police you could contact. They were both involved in the case. They have both closed it. So maybe the Indiana State Police, since we have sent a request to them for them to reopen the case and actually investigate it this time. Or somebody can message me directly if they want to.
Perfect.
Great.
And I would imagine if they join the group, then they can stay in the loop about whether you are able to hire a private investigator and get in touch with them if need be. So it's a good way to keep a finger on top of the case, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. It's obviously a lot to handle. We can't imagine what you're going through, but you're so amazing for, telling your story over and over again to try and get justice for your son.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you guys helping share a story. That seems like that's the best thing that I can do right now is to try to get it more well known.
So I think probably all we've been watching this week to speak of, I know we both saw The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window.
I'm glad that you wrote that down because I cannot even imagine trying to remember that title.
I could never remember that on the spot.
It's so ridiculous.
It is absurd. It's more absurd really than the show itself, which I feel I expected something like a little more over the top absurd. Yeah. It was a little more subtle with the satire approach, which I think what we can tell from what we've seen in feedback, some people got into, and it didn't really cut it for others, I guess, because it was a little more on the subtle side. But I thought it was really fun. I watched it all real quick.
I loved it. It's all I wanted to do over the weekend. And when I had to I was packing, I'm in Croatia now and I'm packing and I'm can I squeeze in an episode? I'd really like to see what happens.
Yes.
Oh, man, I just loved it. I ate it up.
Same. Yeah. I think that's the first one in a long while that I watched in 2 days. So I can't wait for season 2.
It's just hard to go wrong with Kristen Bell. And it's like,
True.
you're getting a little bit of her being like kind of detective-y, a little bit subtly Veronica Mars plus a whole lot of wine. And
yeah, it's like a middle-aged Veronica Mars.
Yes.
Like what would happen at that point?
Yeah.
Just amazing.
But like her like pouring a glass of wine to the top and then not being able to pick up the glass and having to slurp it. Like that's going to 100% be a gift.
Each and every time. Yeah.
As it needs to be.
That is the perfect gift for a lot of situations.
Yes. So good.
Oh my God, love it. So yeah, I think you should all give it a shot if you haven't seen it. Very fun.
Yeah, loved it.
Well, I guess that's enough murder for 1 week. If you disagree and could stand more murder than one show can contain, you can always find us on the OG murdermurder.news for the latest breaking true crime news every day of the week.
You can also find us on Instagram at Murder Murder News, where this week we had a special interview with Bria Dauncey, who is the creator of Batwings and Butterflies, a super, super fantastic Etsy store that we recommend for little like creepy, spooky crochet projects, including like voodoo dolls and goat deities.
So cute. Yeah.
It's so great. She's very active on Instagram, and we have our articles, so go check that out. You can also find us on Twitter at Murder News. You can find us on TikTok at Murder Murder News, where this week we did the true crime history this past Sunday about a wrongful conviction case of a man who served 38 years in prison for a crime he did not commit.
That was another one taken on by the Innocence Project, right?
Yes, so fantastic. Yeah. You can also find us on Facebook just by searching for Murder Murder News.
And while you're on Facebook searching for Murder Murder News, you'll also see our group pop up. You'll want to join us there if you'd like to be more active in the MMN community. And you'll definitely want to be a member of that group if you'd like to join our virtual book club. We've just made our next few selections, and in February, we're reading We Keep the Dead Close, A Murder at Harvard, and A Half Century of Silence by Becky Cooper. The first book club meeting of 2022 will be on Sunday, February 27th, and we'll meet on Zoom. If you'd love nothing more than to chat about true crime and spooky fiction with your favorite podcast hosts and fellow monsters, make sure to join our group and get started on We Keep the Dead Close.
Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your podcast platform of choice. Reviews help new fans find the show and also let us know what you like best about the show so we can continue to deliver all the good stuff.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great week. See you all next Friday.
Bye, friends.
Bye.